Mijn spanningsboog.
Welcome to our conference devoted to theater collective work. The first part of the conference I will lead with Kasia Tusz, who is the programmer of Malta Festival, and my name is Agata and I work here in the Theater and Media Arts Institute, but I am also the theater curator. We'll lead the meeting, the panel discussion with our guests. The title of the panel discussion is How do the Flemish? And our guests are Jan Lauwers, theater director and visual artist, and one of the curators of this year Malta Festival. Lisaboa Houbrechts, theater director for this group, Kuiperskaai. Okay. And Mr. Joris Janssens, who is head of research and development, Flanders Arts Institute. And okay, so maybe we'll start. The first is the presentation of Mr. Joris Janssens about the system of collective work, of Flemish collective work.
Well, the system. In fact,
excuse me. Sorry, one more thing because I have forgotten to say. We have the interpreters, Mrs. Marta Włodaczyk and Mrs. Anna Broniarek. And może tak, do tych z Państwa, chciałabym tylko powiedzieć tym z Państwa, którzy nie znają języka angielskiego, że gościmy tłumaczki. Jeżeli by Państwo chcieli mieć ten panel przetłumaczony, zapraszam, tutaj Panie będą tłumaczyć to na bieżąco. Czy ktoś potrzebuje? Okej.
To my Państwo niech Państwo siedzieć, pójdziemy tam.
Okej. Sorry, Mr. Joris Janssens.
All right, so I packed my bag coming here, and in my suitcase I got a lot of examples of collectives working in Flanders. Having worked in Flanders, also have a presentation, 20-25 minutes, with a lot of examples of a diversity of approaches towards collective models in the performing arts from Flanders, from the past and from the present. What I'd like to do is not only demonstrate the diversity of approaches, but also get a glimpse of the motivations behind these collective working models. Of course, artistic connections, really the click that is in most cases the important driver, but there's more to this. What I try to do is have a look and read these examples as different forms of trying to create more sustainable working conditions for artists in an ecosystem, also organizing solidarity in an ecosystem, which has changed a lot since the 1980s. And in fact, when you talk about Flemish performing arts, it's a good idea to start in the 80s, because you might know this story. It's quite spectacular in a very limited frame of time.
Okay. Sorry, there you goes your computer. All right.
You might know that a number of important artists still playing the world's most prestigious stages today. They're still active. They debuted in a limited number of time, early 80s. And it's quite remarkable because at that moment there wasn't really a policy for contemporary performing arts. There was not really a budget for contemporary performing arts. Just one graph to illustrate this. This is the division of the dance budget in 1985, and at that moment 98% of the budget went to the Royal Ballet and 2% of the budget for dance went to contemporary dance, a company, Rosas, and a festival Klapstuk. So at that moment, one could fairly say that Flemish support for dance was really peanuts. But what interests us now is what did the people do, what did the artists do, what did the people supporting the artists do. And I'd first present that one example, the VZW Schaamte. Schaamte means shame, VZW means non-profit. And it's an interesting early example of self-organizations of artists and people supporting artists. It's an organization started in 1978, ran until 1987. In fact, it still exists today because it's the basis of the Kai Theater. That is still the non-profit based on Schaamte, but it started like a collective semi-artist-run organization, also supporting the early work of young Lauwers with the Epigonen Theater collective before Needcompany. And it's interesting to explain a little bit how this organization works. The artists, they shared management and promotion, people doing supporting the international networking. Also, they shared infrastructure. But what's really very striking and interesting, looking from a contemporary perspective, is also the financial management. And when preparing the quote, I found this press conference from 1982, and a lot of time in the press conferences was really devoted to explaining how the financial management worked, and I'd like to explain to you. So this is a quote from this press conference. It might be small for people in the back, so I'll read. So they explain they have one bank account, and all the revenues from all the artists went into one bank account, and everybody could use also that budget at that time when there was a need to produce new work. So you had the solidarity system, financial solidarity system, artists going on tour, they had incomes. At the same time, other artists needed to produce, so they needed the budget for that. So this is really very striking. It's also explained explicitly as really organizing solidarity and trust. So it's explained everyone poses great trust in the productions of others and is willing to take risks without being directly involved in the artistic practice, all right, or in the artistic product. It's really very, very cutting edge. We see a number of organizations today working also in this vein, but I think none of them as extreme as Schaamte back in the days. So it's a striking example, maybe also briefly to illustrate that all the other functions also in this ecosystem which did not yet exist were tackled collectively. So not only artistic creation, not only management and production, but also co-production, presentation. There was a whole system of art centers which popped up kind of like out from nowhere. They organized themselves, they organized touring circuits, they worked together for international co-production and international networking. They worked together for advocacy, really lobbying with the Flemish government to invest more in contemporary performing arts. And with the support from international networks, really kind of like an ecosystem was created almost from scratch. And you see that's one graph to show that the budget followed in 1985. You had the Rosas and Klapstuk there, but a lot more dance projects received funding till 1992. And after that we had a new decree. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So you see that the government followed slowly, and it's interesting also to see what happens then from the artistic point of view and the way artistic practice was organized. At that moment, late 80s, you see that these artists working together in Schaamte, for instance, or other collectives, they started their own companies. And I think it's not only because the budgets have risen. It's important to stress that there was also an ideology behind that. I have a quote by Marianne van Kerkhoven, who was really the famous dramaturge. She accompanied the artistic development since the 1980s, and when she looked back on what happened really in the 1980s, this is a really important quote. She says, a situation was reached when it became possible to give professionalism not only a social but also an artistic interpretation. So the starting point is that the work structure defines what you can do as an artist. So it's important to gain control as an artist, and having your own company is really very important there. Marianne said that artistic freedom means that all the options taken in regard to the work, you should have control about that. About how you approach the audience, how you talk with co-producers. It's all you need to have control. And that was kind of like the ideology also behind the organizational development in the 1980s. And to briefly point out, also the government followed, because since 1993 we have a series of laws which really start from this bottom-up approach. So you have the institutions, they are in the decree. At this moment they have 1/3 of the budget, I think, for the arts. But for the rest, it's really bottom-up. So you apply, there are very few regulations, and then it's treated through peer evaluation. So there is, it's really a bottom-up system, which is, I think, quite unique in the world from that perspective. So that was the 1980s and early 90s. And what I'd like to do now is briefly explain how the ecosystem in the performing arts in Flanders it has changed a lot. I have 2 or 3 infographics. Just to explain the basis, at the Arts Institute we have a large database with information about all the productions since the early 80s. The titles, of course, and the season, but also who were the organizers involved, the co-producers, the artists. And that way we can detect trends. And one trend which we see is that since the early 80s there's a huge increase in the number of productions which we have in our database each year. Also, we have a huge increase in the number of artists we have in our database each year. It used to be around 1,500, now it's more than 3,500. So, and indeed, funding has risen, but there are a lot of more companies applying for it, a lot of more artists. So from the perspective of an artist, it's really a struggle. The competition for the funding at this moment is really very, very, very tough. What you need to demonstrate in order to receive project funding, it's become really very tough. So this is the perspective of the artist while the budget has risen. So this means that you need to cooperate also in order to be able to produce. One last statistic or graph which shows the number of partners you need to mount a production. And in 1993, more than 80% of the productions was made just by one single company. So there you had this control. But now you need to mobilize a lot of partners, and there's a lot of energy going through that. So at this moment, it's only 30% of the productions made by one single company, and the rest is made in co-production, sometimes with more than 20 different partners. So it's, you can ask yourself, where is the limit to that? Because indeed, where does it leave the artists? That is the question, of course, at hand. And I'd like to, well, instead of showing more graphs, I'd like to present you with a quote by Ash Bulayev. He gave a speech last year at one of our conferences. He's a curator working from Greece, also working with artists, and he presented us with 2 examples of really famous performing artists in dance, contemporary dance, Trudgell Harrell, Maria Hasabi. And this is the quote. So, yes, it's too small, but I'll explain to you. These are 2 artists, and they used to be based in New York City, but they've chosen to leave New York City, and they relocated to Europe. And not to one country, but they work, in fact, in 5 different cities and countries at the same time. And in neither of these countries, they receive structural funding. In neither of these countries, they have an organization that really supports their trajectory. So what Ash explained to us, yeah, well, it's a patchwork quite successfully of co-productions, commissions, residencies, private and public funding. But if described to an outsider, their professional lives and tempo are truly manic, illustrating the life of a freelance artist lifestyle. So this is an illustration of the position of really major artists also in the system today. We have evaluated to a system of flex work. Position of artists in the field right now is very diverse. You have artists who have structural funding, but there are a lot of others, and some of them, they don't want it. Point is, you have a diversification of careers. Next to that, you see a diversity of organizations. You have companies, production houses, but also workspaces, art centers, cultural centers, arts labs. And the promise of the system that is a match between the 2, right? So that there is congruency. But as Ash explained, using these examples, it's a promise of the system, but for a lot of artists, it's also kind of like a utopia. So one could say also that at this moment, with a really professional system, that a lot of artists are really weak links in the chain still today. So what are we going to do then? For the second part of this speech, I brought a number of examples, because a lot of artists see really collectivity as an answer to that. We saw it in the early 80s. We see it today. So let's have a look at some of the strategies deployed. And of course, with a panel like today, we must talk about intergenerational solidarity, because what we see is that the resources which have been developed by the generation of the 80s and the early 90s, by all the organizations that are still active, it's really put into place to support also newer generations, right? We'll talk later about MIL, where Needcompany is hosted, and also Kuiperskaai, but also other organizations, they have resources which they put into place. for others. We're talking about infrastructure, but also about networks, about know-how, about mentoring. For instance, Toneelhuis now has a mentorship program. I think you are involved in that as well. Maybe you can talk about it later. Also, symbolic capital, which helps to mobilize international resources. It's very diverse. First strategy, intergenerational solidarity. Thing is, some artists can profit of that, but there's a lot of more need, so other artists are organizing themselves. So then we will have a look at artistic collectives now, and there's a diversity of approaches. There's a lot of artistic ensembles, families, actors collectives, artists working together for artistic creation. We saw that already in the 1980s, and earlier, of course. We still see it today. Kuiperskaai is a good example of that. But there are also other approaches. What I must point out here also that it's very important to stress that these are collectives that function more or less as hubs. So it's not that you are in kind of like a closed situation. It's a hub used by artists, but they are always free to work with other people in other contexts, for television, for instance, or in other art situations. It's kind of like open platforms, but also a point where you come back to. So it's kind of like structuring also the career of these artists. It has been the case like that since the 80s, and it's still, a feature of these artistic collectives. But there are also other examples of different working models. I brought two other types of self-organization or examples. This one is an organization called ManyOne. And it's a screenshot from their website, and there is ManyOne. So it's the name of the organization. But in big, you see the name of the individual artist, and that is really the difference, as it is explained also in the quote on the website. This is a supporting structure, which does not function as a label. It's a collective, but really tailored to the need of individual artists. So you have 4 choreographers here with their individual practice, and that is also their label to the outside world. But ManyOne is kind of like a solidarity structure behind that, supporting the work of these artists. It's similar to Schaamte in the 1980s, but I think they don't go that far in terms of financial solidarity, but I must ask them. Spin is another example of these kind of like collectives of individual artists. And it's an example which I showed to make clear that these organizations, a lot of them, they're not only about producing the work, but they do also other activities. Here you see that Spin is organizing also workshops, lectures, public talks, other collaboration, and the topic is position of artists in the performing arts fields, but also broader, the position of flex workers in society. So what happens there, it's also collective reflection among artists about their position in the field. So different functions being taken up by these artist-run organizations. And then third strategy, organizing the peer space. By this we mean the broader network of artists meeting each other and strengthening each other. And this is being organized also in kind of like informal networks. In Brussels you have an informal artist network, individual artists working mostly internationally. It's called State of the Arts. They have been meeting every Monday, first Monday of the month for I think 6, 7, 8 years. And sometimes they have projects together. 2 examples here. In September they will organize a summer camp, right, for the artists, and they will develop a fair art almanac. So this is going to be a publication which is used really as a way to exchange know-how and knowledge about fair practices in the arts field, as a way to really share knowledge within the artist community, but also as a way of raising awareness towards the broader arts field. So this is something that SOTA does. Okay. Organizing the peer space. So it's important that the artists are also networking outside of the organizations to empower themselves, to share know-how and infrastructure, and to raise awareness. And then maybe a last strategy as a cluster of some examples, it's connecting to communities. And certainly compared to the 1980s, we see that some collectives function a little bit differently. I have two examples or three. KAK is the Kuiperskaai Alliantie voor Knutselaars. How to translate that into Polish, I don't know. Kuiperskaai is community in Brussels, alliance of bricoleurs, people working with their hands. It's a collective of young artists, and what is specific for them is that they make productions, yes, but they go and squat. They go in a certain place in a difficult neighborhood, and they really co-create with local inhabitants. So it's really, they go and live there for a couple of months, and then it's what happens there, you don't know it in advance. Here for this this production, they kind of like made a television screen in the etalage of the squat, and people could come and just work with them for a common showing. So this is co-creation, still with an artistic product as a result, but sometimes that isn't even the case. This is my last example. It's Espace Tous by Aina Tuchma, who has been very active in state of the arts, so in organizing this artist network. But also the last couple of years she really went out of this artist network and really went in the local area, very close also to where Needcompany is hosted at this moment in Mill. So what Einat is doing is setting up systems for exchange of skills. And she's collecting all the skills in the neighborhood and setting up dramaturgical and scenographical installations to really help people exchanging these skills. This is a photo taken last Sunday at the Fête des Quartiers, the local neighborhoods festival, where she set up this tent, and here is the guy who collected all the sounds in the area and collects reactions of people to the sounds. Here are the ladies, they are sewing bags, and people living in the area can put messages on the bags. So it's really kind of like an artistic process. It's artists setting up processes to really help the neighborhoods exchange these skills. So connecting to communities, it's really an important trend, and I think for us it's quite new if you look at historical developments. Maybe you have advanced further, I don't know. But we see it's also, I think, a response to the way in which the performing arts field is organized. A lot of people, if you want to really pursue a career, you need to be very active also on the international level. It's a hectic system of touring, co-producing. There's a lot of artists really want to get out of that and really relocalize their practices through co-creation, but also applying artistic skills in different social contexts. So that was a lot of examples of different approaches, of different strategies. Maybe just to recap in a nutshell. We started in the 1980s, where we saw a lot of collective, collaborative approaches to really tackle the different functions and create an ecosystem out of nothing. We saw also in our fast forward and with the trends that there's a lot of pressure on the system and that artists are really in a weak position. And then we had a number of strategies, and a lot of people are really exploring different kinds of collectivity still today as an answer to these pressures. Maybe just as a change also, we see also right now and in the past that different functions are being tackled. Really this connection to the communities, I think that is really an urgency which has been felt more urgent last couple of years. You can talk also about that because it's also happening at the Mill. But this is kind of like, the diversity of approaches at this moment. Thank you.
Okay. Can I immediately say something about it? Can I talk?
Can you sit here? So
yes.
We see you. Thank you.
I have to, standing up. I often disagree of what he proposed. It's a very technical thing, but it is. You have to realize when we talk about schaamte, the first collective idea was not at all a collective idea, because you forget one person, that's Hugo de Greef. Hugo de Greef was a man who was very close with some French artists, and he was an outstanding manager. He was the boss. So he said to the artist, okay, let's sit around the table You don't know anything about money, anything about constructions or structures. You are artist. I do everything for you. That's what he said. He was the boss. And that's why he could found Schaamte and afterwards Sky Theatre. And so it was the word collectivity in what you use or you use. I think it's semantically a very difficult word, because you can make a collective construction maybe, but it's always directed by one or two persons. When I started with Schaamte, when you say there was one account, because Hugo de Geef had an account, you know. I didn't have an account. I was 24 or 23 years old. I didn't care about money. We were taxi drivers, or we worked in a bar, and with some money we made something. And that was the reality. And we worked 10 years like that. With Epigonen Theater, the first collective I started in '79, that was really with the idea of collectivity. I wanted to make something together with people. And so we were some friends, and we started to make Epigonen. Epigonen means that you are copying your master. I thought at that moment that art was too much copying each other, and said, let's be very clear, we are Epigonen, we do now exactly what the previous people do. We have no pretension that we can invent anything, and so we have a master. But then after, with Epigonen, was written also Epigonen without a master. That was the total title. So it was already a contradiction in itself, because we didn't want to have any boss. This takes like 6 months, and there's a boss. That's my reality, and I see that always the one who works the most takes the biggest responsibility. And what is maybe interesting to say is that in this idea of collectivity, there is look at the names historically of companies, like Wooster Group from the United States. I think is the most beautiful example. Wooster Group is maybe the best collective ever. And it was only by one woman, is Liz Lecomte. And nobody knows her name. I mean, specialists know her name, but more people know the name Wooster Group. And secondarily, you know the name Liz Lecomte. But it was, everything was Liz Lecomte in Wooster Group. But she didn't want to have her name in front. I didn't use my name for the first 10 years. Also with Needcompany, there was not my name. Needcompany became famous, my name, nobody knew it. And then there were more self-aware artists like Jan Fabre or Wim van der Kuijbus. They say, I put my name in front. And that was already a signification of say, what is collectivity? If you can sell your work better in your own name than in the name of a group. Rosas was very important, and it existed already 10 years, and then Anne-Therese de Keesmaker, her name became more important than Rosas. But nobody knows the collective of Jan Fabre. The name is Troublin. Nobody uses the word Troublin. It's Fabre. So I fight like hell to have Needcompany. And then Hugo de Geef, the same Hugo de Geef, said, Jan, you have to put your name in front of Needcompany if you want to survive. And at that moment, I stretched it out. I said, I'm no longer the solo artist in Needcompany. That was with Epigonen. And then with Needcompany, I said to Grace Ellen Barkey, let's do it together. Then Maarten Segers came in, Hans-Peter Dahl. All other artists came in the realm of Needcompany. But it was due to the fact that I was a bit the bulldozer. I was pulling it and trying to. The manager of Needcompany is sitting over there. We have money, and for example, the show, maybe some people saw the show yesterday of Maarten Segers. We don't find co-production money for Maarten Segers, so the co-production to make this show comes out of the money that we do with, for example, Warren Turpentine. We try to balance these things, and this you can say there's some kind of collectivity there, but it's in fact always around one person who takes this initiative. And that's why I just wanted to point that out. It is not a romantic idea, let's all work together and see what happens. That is not how it works. It never worked in art. There is not one collective in art. Doesn't exist. Try to find it. Doesn't exist. You have fantastic people like Lupa or Walikowski. Those are individual people. And then I think the idea of collectivity is in the way you work, is in the mentality of work, is when you make the choice between production and reproduction. That is the collectivity. What is different between production and reproduction? Repertory theater, what you said in the beginning, repertory theater is a reproduction machine. You make a show directed by somebody, written by somebody, and you ask actors who almost don't have a choice to play or not to play. They are fully paid a year and they have to do that. So that is not a collective. If you fight against reproduction and you come off the performance arts, then you take production as a tool. So I can say, or Martin can say, I make this show that he did yesterday, but the individual production mechanism of Rombout and Nicolas, the two others, are equally important. But at the end, Rombout and Nicolas will say, Martin, you sign. We don't sign. It's your work. And that's the deal you make. So the freedom of collectivity is in the production mechanism.
Yes, I think there are two levels of collectivity. The one level is the system. For example, organizing and financial system. For example, as you said, now 1/3 of, as you said, one third of budget is devoted to the institutions. So 2/3 of budget is devoted to the collectives, right? And as I understand, and as Jan said as well, the collectives are the groups of friends, the people that think in some kind of similar way, or they are good for fighting for some ideas, but there is always some strong person or two strong persons, right? So the democracy is something which is
I think
really
they can all be strong
to discuss.
persons. They can all be, everybody can be strong in this group of people, but they make a deal, they make an agreement that when they work with Kuiperskaai, but maybe you can explain that much better than me, all these people of Kuiperskaai are very strong, very good artists who come together to make the show that you can see tonight. They come together because of Lisaboa at that moment. She decides at the end everything, but the choice is there. They come in to do that. It's not because they are paid or something. They are there because they want to do that. The soul of a performance, the soul of a production is finally decided by one person.
Okay, but that's what you said, we and me also, I don't believe in kind of a quite democratic way. There is always somebody that decides in the end. But that's what we are interested in Poland at the moment, is this system for collectives. Because when you want to work in collectivity system now, you have like 5 to 7% of public money, because about 93% of public money is spent for repertory theater. So when you want to do the collectives, you are there is really the precarious work or volunteer work, and we don't have this system at all. And I would like to ask you, because as I read, you have this theater law for the collectives formed in '93, and then some of small groups made chance of subsidies at the expenses of large urban theaters. So some urban theaters was taken the money, and the money were spent for small collectives, right? because so it changed.
Well, the situation was like that. You had a number of large institutions, for instance, the Opera House or the Royal Ballet. They received their money outside of this degree, so it was a one-on-one agreement with the government. And in the system of 1993, it was kind of like a coherent system for all the other organizations. Also, we have a number of city theaters. They used to be our repertory theaters. They're also in the system where you need to apply for funding every 4 or 5 years, together with all the other organizations, right? So they're in that system.
Okay, so it was much easier than in Poland because we have repertory theaters. And
yeah, but what is your ambition? Let's talk first about the framework.
About the frame.
Wait. The framework is, if what happened in Belgium is, or in Flanders, because it's less in the southern part of Belgium, it's more in the north part of Belgium, the Flemish part, is the international approach. That was in fact the key. We wanted to go abroad. Flanders is 6 million people, there are 5 cities, 5 theatres, and that's it. So you have to go away. So we were thinking, how can we expand? And that's where the Flemish wave comes from, because we were not Flemish, we were international from the beginning. And then, and that is important when you want to start something in Poland. Is it for Poland or is it for Europe, for an example? It's a big difference. It's a big difference. We talk about, you talk about repertory theatre. We destroyed repertory theatre in Flanders in the 80s, 90s. We destroyed this. It's kaput.
How did you do it?
Because
I don't want to destroy repertory theatre, but I don't want the monopoly of repertory theatre.
No, but why? Because the young generation in the 80s had more talent. There was all of a sudden this realm of people working against these buildings. We didn't want to go inside these buildings. And now we own the buildings. And this is something that is very dangerous, is that we were, in the 80s, we became festival directors. You have repertory directors or city theater directors, and you have festival directors. It's a bit silly, but we lived from the fact that there were festivals in Europe where we could find co-productions and we could present our work. What happens now is that the big institutions take over the festivals. So the autonomous groups like Needcompany or Rosa's not, but Needcompany, Prowadzenie, they have a very hard time because the big institutions, they make deals. You have the Toneelhuis in Antwerp makes a deal with Odeon de Paris, makes a deal with Catalan National Theatre, and they are exchanging, and when you're not in that system, you're dead. We are kaput in 10 years. Needcompany will not exist in 10 years if we don't take over the buildings. That is the reality now. And that's why it's interesting for you in Poland. What is your ambition? What is your ambition with an institution that Walikowski is in Warsaw? Is it a national thing? Do you want to have it international? What does it mean? How do you work? And is Poland big enough to not travel? Flanders was not big enough.
You know, Walikowski is a great theater director, and his situation in Poland, his position is extremely strong. We are really wondering how to lead, how to create the collectives and to work not as volunteers. And even if some directors decide to be taxi drivers, to support their lives, they would work in Poland as taxi drivers 10 hours a day. So the collectives wouldn't possible. You know, this is also different economic situation of Belgium and Poland. So we earn quite much.
That is what he said, that the unique system of the support of artists in Belgium, that with the new decree and all that in the 90s, it is absolutely one of the best systems because it's, let's say, much more democratic.
Yes.
When she was 23 years old, you study and you apply. You make a dossier, they learn to make a dossier, they give it to the government, and they give maybe 10,000 euro, maybe 20,000 euro, maybe nothing. It's a bit a gamble. Who gets the money? But everybody can apply, all the time.
And there are so many peanuts right, in this grant system.
Yes.
And in Poland, we have really, really small subsidy. For example, for all Wielkopolska, the part of Poland we live in, our Wielkopolska region, there is for cultural events the same money as for one theater. For all 300 organizations, that applies for that. So you can understand, 200 or 300 organizations applies for the money of about 2 million euros, and this is the subsidy for the Marshall Office Theatre. So they really can't
it's all about the
live
political
on
choice.
it. So some artists really create collectives, repertory theatre, but this is in very Machiavellic way. But it's for another discussion. So, Lisaboa, because you have also your collective,
Yes.
right? And when you started, you were 22, 23 years old?
21.
21.
Yes.
And how did it start?
We started because I was studying at the conservatory in Ghent, and I had a hard time finding my way, because also in the conservatories, for example, the approach is very individual. People want to create individual actors, individual directors, but I could not find my way. So then I met Victor, Romy, and Oscar. They are the three other members of the company, and we were influenced by each other. I saw them working. Victor is a poet, and he was writing, and he was studying film at the time at the conservatory. Romy is a performer, and she was acting, and Oscar was a painter. And
What did you study?
I had studied acting.
Acting, okay.
And we all decided to go and live together in a big atelier in a big space in Ghent, in order to start working together. But this was not the initial idea. The first idea was that we were just inspired by each other's work. I was trying to find my way. I had a big struggle, actually. And because I had the feeling that in the conservatory I failed to be a bit the person or the model that they had in mind, I found my way in creating by founding Kuiperskaai with 3 other people, and also they gave me a lot of comfort, and they give me artistic food, or how you say, like they give me inspiration to really follow my own path. And then the first things that we made were really were more performances, because we organized exhibitions in this atelier space where we also lived in. And I wanted to be part of that, so I started to talk with Romy and to create with her our first pieces. And then I invited other people, other members, so they were mostly students of the conservatory as well. And
what were the main subject of the studies? Because I understood there was one poet, one filmmaker,
but
actor.
They were not really studying they were not specializing that specific. They were like artists that were also exploring a bit artistic field on all levels. All levels. But I was studying acting in the conservatory, like to become an actress. So at the moment, I felt then with the people then that when we created Kuiperskaai, I was in Flanders or in Ghent, where I studied a lot of interest for it, because it was one of the few young collectives coming out of schools that were really like a bit protesting against this idea of school, against this idea of creating an ego around yourself, but really to start something up together. So there was a kind of a myth around this place, because in this place we also lived in that place, we worked in that place. So it was a kind of.
But it was also excellent work what you did. Outside, and the way they worked, the way they presented it, the school didn't even accept it. They were still in school when they did it, and the school didn't accept that they were working abroad. And then they felt that you were really good, and then even the director of the school became part of Kuiperskaai at a certain moment.
Yeah. Then
You know, they switched because of the quality also.
Yeah.
And it is interesting because it's the first thing for a collectivity work. You can choose the people with whom you want to work.
Yes, of course,
because it's not so obvious in Poland when you work in repertory theater, which have this monopoly. So I think this is very important. The second thing,
maybe it's very short. When you say so, the ensemble in the Polish theater, there's an ensemble and of fully paid actors, let's say, and they play Chekhov or Shakespeare, whatever. This ensemble idea in Belgium is stopped also in the 90s. So all the intendants and the bosses of the houses, like Ton Hela's, they said, we fire all the actors, everybody is freelancing, and we pay the directors. That was a switch. And so every actor was free again. And in the beginning it was dramatic. There were people already 30 years paid and they were no longer paid or something. Oh, I have to work for something. I give you another example. Burgtheater in Vienna. They have 140 fully paid actors. 140. Ensemble of 140. The new intendant, I talked now about 8 years ago, he came in Burgtheater. And he said, the first production I want to do is, I want to work with the actors who were not on stage for the last 5 years and were paid. Because they all worked with the same people, the best ones. And there were like 20 people, 5 years fully paid and never on stage.
In Poland it happens as well in some theaters, like for
but
example,
so
Stare Theaters.
destroy this ensemble idea
Absolutely.
is an interesting approach, I think.
Okay. But as I understand, even if the actors were in panic in the beginning, then they understood and they learned this system because the subsidy for the collectives was much bigger. So having few productions a year, they could earn.
In fact, what happened was the actors who used to work in the ensemble system, they went out of the performing arts system. So at the same time we had commercial television.
Went out, okay.
And the commercial television station started with a soap opera, and these kinds of soap operas, they were quite new in television, and that is where the old actors of the old ensembles went to work. So
but not all of them. Some of them decided to be
it's
artists.
a minority of the people working in the old system that managed to get into the new system because the mindset is completely different. Also what you already said, collectivity, yes, but the basis is also the autonomy of an actor, of a performer. And in all the collectives, for instance, Stan or the Rovers, that is really the starting point. The collection of really autonomous individuals and also the interdependency between the different people. So this is really a mindset, and it's a huge responsibility for an actor to assume that role. And a lot of people in the old system were not used to think like that. They used to listen to the director, and that is a major shift, right?
And I think these kind of artists are the biggest guards of this kind of system in Poland, because they are really scared of the future based on grants. Okay, but I try to collect a little bit what we said. So you can choose, and it's the base, you can choose the people you want to work with. It gives you some kind of freedom. The second thing, there is no kind of hierarchy like we have we learn it in our theater schools, and then we reproduce in the theaters, that we have the theater directors, the group of artists that should listen to him. There is the set designer, who is the artist, and here in the group could be the people of various artistic professions. So this role is not fixed as we have in our theater system. There is some kind of freedom. You're the actor, but you can be the director. You can do, if you want, some visual, how it is.
I don't think so. I don't think so. It's a choice. I cannot make theater without making the set design and costume. I decide everything, apart from the production mechanism of the actor. The actor, I write on the skin of the actor. The actor is my source of inspiration. So the choice for who you write is already the first thing. But I'm a visual artist, and I decide the set design. I cannot work with somebody else's set design. there are directors who are not visual artists and they work with a set designer. That's also a choice. But you cannot say today I'm a set designer, tomorrow I'm a director, and the day after I'm an actor. That doesn't work. I don't think so. You can do that, eh?
Of course, I understand,
but
because there are about some skills and talents as well.
Yeah.
But it's not so, like for example, there is a poet and in the group and the writer.
Yeah, but with us it's also still different because, for example, there's somebody doing the scenography all the time, and I work with him now for 6 years. It's Oscar. We started when we were young, and we're still young. We are already busy for some years. But the interesting aspect about it is that he's not specialized in scenography. He's an abstract painter. He's busy with abstract painting, and he approaches ideas of scenography in a way that we are still inventing it together. This is a conversation that I have with Oscar, and we are what does it mean. And it's different, for example, in the more traditional theaters. When you come there, for example, we are now doing a collaboration in Barcelona with some other directors, and they have somebody that does the scenography, and he does that apart from the process. He does that in the space where we will perform, and we are rehearsing in the rehearsal room. For me, this is an idea that I don't understand in a way, that he is making a scenography when we are not working on it. This is for me really strange. And while I am not really building the scenography totally myself because I'm not a visual artist, I am engaged in thinking about scenography with Oscar, who is a visual artist. So this is already different than the way Needcompany and Jan works. With people that have like autonomous positions, like Oscar, he is doing the scenography without that it means that he is like a professional doing the scenography outside.
But he is also the independent visual artist.
Yes.
Which is very strong, because in Poland, most of our set designers are only devoted to do the set designs. So this is kind of profession. Sorry, Kasia, maybe.
I would like to get back a little bit to more general remarks about the qualities of collective thinking. So the system, sorry, I need to go. So the system is of course like the practical framework, and we can't escape from the reality, like from the environment, but I would like to ask about qualities that you keep in mind while maintaining collective and working with the group of close people. For instance, if you, like, Needcompany was also for some period of time involved in collaboration with Theater in Vienna, which is of course a big institution, one of the richest theater in Europe.
I think
so the richest one. Okay, so once you work in such environment, how do you keep this quality of your work? How you somehow negotiate with given conditions. Another example, the opera in Salzburg. The opera in Salzburg you work on now. So this is also kind of a very conservative, let's say, environment, yes? So I would like to get back a bit to, the philosophy of your artistic work,
yes,
adapted to this.
I can answer to those two things, Burgtheater and the opera in Salzburg. First of all, when Matthias Hartmann, the intendant of Burgtheater, asked me to do something for Burgtheater, I said no, and he phoned me 2 years every day to convince me. So I went to visit them, and he said to me, I give you a very clear assignment. You do exactly whatever you want to do here. I pay you, and I want you to make all the actors uncomfortable with your production system. It was really an artistic choice, and that's where I started really to think very clearly about what is reproduction and what is production. The actors of Burgtheater are phenomenal in reproduction. They play, the system of Burgtheater is a killing system. They play every night another show. Monday Chekhov, Tuesday Shakespeare, Thursday Molière. And the good actors are in all these shows. So you have to imagine you play 6 shows a week for 200 days, and you know 10 or 12 texts by heart. Monday you play Macbeth, Tuesday you play the Misanthrope. I know these actors. How to survive is they invest in an incredible reproduction system. Because if they put their soul in it, they commit suicide. And it happened a lot. So I worked with some fantastic performers in the reproduction mechanism. They said, my hair is private. I play Macbeth with the blonde wig, otherwise I lose myself. They needed that. The ego has to disappear, they say. I come from the system, and also Lisaboa comes from the system. What is you as an actor? I want to put you on stage. I write on your skin, and you are you. And now you play Macbeth. The reproduction actor said, this is too vain, this is too narcissistic, we don't want to do that. And I understood that is a big difference and a beautiful difference, but it's a choice. So Matthias Hartmann said to me, come here and take away these wigs and all from these actors. And I had fights with these actors. That when I was directing Caligula with a fantastic actor, Obonia, after 3 weeks he was sitting behind the table and he said, Jan, if we have to go on like this, I cannot do anything. I said, now you are doing something good, I said. And he was crying. And then we became friends, but most of them stepped out, said, sorry, this is not, I don't understand you. So I was, after 5 years, happy to leave because I became a teacher. And I wanted to create. So I could not make what I wanted to make with reproductional actors. That I realized this is not possible. It's another kind of theater. And I can appreciate it totally, but it's another kind of theater. So that's why I did this Burgtheater, and I said to Burgtheater, you're very rich, you give us 250,000 euros every year for me to do whatever I want there, and this goes to the collective of Needcompany. And that's how we survived. They just paid us to stay there and I come there. That's what they did. It was a fantastic deal. After 5 years, I was also happy to leave somehow. That it was Elke was there all the time. The dramaturg Elke Janssens over there, and she. So it was a very intense moment for Needcompany. And then the opera is something else. Markus Hinterhausen is the intendant of Salzburg Festival. He's a fantastic artist. If you ever can see him on stage playing the piano, is amazing. And this guy is the intendant of Salzburg. He phones me, he says, I want to change the whole opera world. Do you want to join me? I said, no. And then he said, yeah, but you do Monteverdi. I said, yes, Monteverdi. Why I say yes to Monteverdi is because it's the same thing. Monteverdi in 1600, read the letters of Monteverdi, he was talking about production and reproduction. All the Baroque is fighting against reproduction. A Baroque singer in opera sings every night differently. Monteverdi didn't write the scores for the musicians. Just a few notes. It's like jazz. It's freedom. In the Baroque, the conductor doesn't flap his hands. You know, and that's why I was intrigued. How can we do now Monteverdi, and why do we think that we invent something? It was already written in 1600, this problem about the difference between reproduction and production. There's nothing new about this. It's always a circle. Comes always back. So that's why I said yes to Salzburg. And how it works financially is that Johan, the manager, says, okay, we make a deal with Salzburg, you give us this amount of money, this goes to Needcompany. I could go also, I can also say, fire me for a year, I go to Salzburg and I earn much more money. We don't do that. We say, okay, give the money to Needcompany, and so we can make with that money something else. That's how it works. But that's a personal choice. Eh? But it is because artistically there was a right person asking it, and not an institution. That's the difference, I think.
He led you to be a virus to this institution.
Yeah.
So after all, you introduce. So after all, it's not a compromise as such, but it's more like this virus strategy. So you go there with your own values and your own philosophy, and you handle with the given situation, but in order to change something, like, okay?
I will tell you just a little detail how difficult it is. First show I did abroad in a big institution like Burgtheater, I made The Tempest of Shakespeare because, okay, let's do a repertory piece once. Let's do it. We did a repertory piece, and I asked an Argentinian actor to play Caliban in Spanish and all that. So that was already very difficult for the German-speaking public. But then, opening night, actors come for the applause. There's a good applause. I'm in the coulisses waiting to go as director, and the stage manager said to me, "Jan, don't go." I said, "What? There's an applause." "I should not go." I said, "I have to go. Be my guest." I come on stage, the whole audience, boo, like that. They started to throw their papers to my face, say boo, boo, boo to me. That was the first approach. So it is a fight sometimes. It is a fight.
But you know, in Poland, some artists try to be the viruses in repertory theater, like you in Burg Theater during your residency. I know, yes. So maybe we let them to ask you some questions about collectivity.
I would like to ask the question about social security in this kind of system, because from what I hear, we wish, or some of us wish, to jump into that freelance and mobility flexible system. But how those people who were for 30 years on the stable payment and then were thrown out to the flexible system, how they sustain their social security, like pensions for old age or something like this?
It's horrible. It's very difficult. It's total poverty. 99% of good performers I know, they are totally poor. Totally poor.
During the whole life, or only when they old?
Or in the beginning?
Well, it depends, eh?
There was something, maybe I can add, there was something that was called in Belgium the statut d'artiste, the artist status, and it was actually a social security system that was foreseen for people who work in seasonal work, like for fishermen, people working in the woods, and who worked for very short periods only and were for longer periods not available for work. And they applied this system for artists at some moment. So from a moment that an artist could prove that he was working for a short period during 2 years, I think 200 days, then he got a special status like the seasonal workers, and that was an intermediate step to guarantee to artists a minimum of social security. But generally it is true that it's still poverty, but that was an intermediate step.
Because I feel that we imagine our Western Europe as this kind of utopian society where everyone is rich, but it's nice to hear that not everyone is rich.
Maybe what's also important to point out in the performing arts degree and in the arts degree, there's also, you need to apply certain baremas or norms if you want to work with artists. So there is for the different categories or functions in relation to artistic practice, actors and others, you need to follow a certain minimum of payment if you receive subsidies. So there's kind of like...
This is for the institution.
This is for the institution, but not
No,
only
no, no.
the institution.
No.
That is the difference. Eh? You can, if you are a theater maker, in Belgium, you can make a dossier, you write a text, you give it to the Minister of Culture, and then there's a committee who decides, okay, we give this girl some money. That's how they survive. That's one thing. And you have to realize the system we have in Flanders is a very comfortable system, and compared to what I feel here, we are much richer. There's more money for art, or the art that we make, than in Poland maybe. I cannot judge that, but I think it's really like that.
I don't try to understand this, the lower panel that you're trying to explain. That if I receive money, I'm applying for this money, I receive this money, so I have to guarantee my artists some minimal...
One moment, just once, every time you have to write a new dossier. Okay. And if you are in the higher system, then you have to apply every 5 years. Then you have a guarantee for 5 years. But never eternal. Never like you are a boss somewhere and you for the rest of your life you're safe. No, you have to, or every 6 months, or every year, or every 5 years.
Yeah. And I think it's important to stress out that an average artist in Belgium, freelance artist, is paid on average 3 months a year. That's it.
Yeah.
So.
But then you still do have something in your imagination, like a minimum wage for an artist, because in Poland we do have minimum social wage, but when we apply for artistic projects, and our government really wants us to lower our budgets, and they do not care how much we pay our artists. If your project is cheap, it's better project. So
there is an interest also, an increasing interest with the administration. They make a business evaluation of all the dossiers, and the fair remuneration of artists has increasingly also become like a subsidy criterion. So on the artistic level, you're completely free. The only thing is you need to convince the commission evaluating your dossier that it's artistically valuable. There's also the administration, and they look towards this. So this is kind of like a security thing in the system. But the reality, of course, from the perspective of artists, is different, because indeed you need to fill a year or a certain period of time with different commissions and projects, and that is, of course, where the problems start, because it's a limited number of artists, an increasing number of artists who find difficulty also to create this patchwork. I had these 2 examples of people. You need to go also work in different places at the same time in order to pursue a career. And last year we did a survey with a lot of performing artists, but also visual artists, musicians in Belgium, in Flanders, and in Brussels. Well, the outcomes of that, it was quite bleak. In fact, there's a lot of artists in the performing arts who the median of wages, it's a lot lower than the average in society, a lot lower. That is one thing, while the education, of course, is higher, so that is one thing. And also we ask questions about job satisfaction, and there's a huge motivation to work as an artist, but a lot of people really asking themselves every day, am I going to step out of the profession or not, because of really the social insecurity also in the system, which is also from your perspective a luxury situation. So it's a décalage between these two.
But it's a political choice. You have a bad minister of culture. We can also have a bad minister of culture. Just this example, why is Needcompany now here? It's not because of your minister of culture. It's because of our minister of culture. So when Malta Festival asked Needcompany to be curator, at the same time they said, the Minister of Culture said 70% of the budget goes away from Malta. If you take a foreign curator, you have to be nationalistic. That's what he said. So they say, no, you come. There's no money. Then Malta Festival, Michał and Kasia went to the Minister of Culture of Flanders to say, we want to invite your people. Okay, he said, I will pay for it. And so he will visit our Minister of Culture, gives money to this festival, because your Minister of Culture makes another political choice. Our Minister of Culture comes and visits Malta Festival in a few days. He will not be, it's not a meet and greet between 2 Ministers of Cultures. It's a political choice. So if in our next Minister of Culture is as reactionary as your Minister of Culture, the whole system changes again. So I think it's always a political choice. And if you're lucky, you have a good Minister of Culture. The German system gives so much money to theater. You can't believe it. One city theater has more money than the whole Polish culture or the whole Flemish culture. It's one theater. Yeah, that's a choice. It's a choice.
Yes, and on that point, I have an open question for the future. We continue to define also our practice and our collectives in terms of the nations. We are presenting some Flemish cases here. We're talking about Polish collectives, but what also about municipalities and the really more the local level. As I understand, also for the Malta Festival, right now the balance has shifted also to local subsidies rather than the national subsidies. In different countries, you see that national governments are receding and they don't want to invest anymore in something as abstract as the arts. But on local context, you see new dynamics popping up, right? And it's less about really artistic autonomy, but also in relation to what's happening locally. And maybe that's also a point to work on to better explain what is really the value of arts in local contexts. And there are so many practices being developed also with you, but also in other examples which I showed. But I think we're also lacking a language to really describe the value of that and to go into discussion with that, about that with local stakeholders. So it can be also an idea to reframe this and get a little bit back from the national system, because in a way, maybe it's already behind us, but maybe look forward and see other opportunities more on a combination of international and local, but it's an open question.
What is the institution responsible for grants? Is it only the Ministry of Culture?
In the institutions in
Yes,
Flanders?
like
Yeah, it's a mix, in fact.
It's mixed.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
Ministry of Culture, and what else?
Well, there's
Who decides about grants? Who shares the grants?
City
Where can you
government
apply?
also. City is powerful.
sometimes it's different between the different, really the local histories play a very great role, and sometimes it diversifies. But for instance, the city theaters, it's like 50-50, I think mostly the city and the Flemish ministries. In some cases also provinces are involved a little bit. It depends, but yeah, it's always mixed financing.
But the commission who is deciding is always a peer group. That is very important to stress out. So when you have a dossier, like Jan was saying, you fill in a dossier to get a grant, a project grant or a structural grant for 5 years, then a peer group of our own sector will decide a following order of the best dossiers.
Okay.
And on the basis of that, the administration will prepare a division of money, and on the basis of that, the minister will take a final decision, but it'll be always in relation with the other ministers of Flanders, because they want to keep balance as well. So you do get strange shifts and at the last day as well.
Yeah.
Some other questions?
I have another question. You said that, I'm talking to Jan Lauwers now, you said that your manager once convinced you to put your name in front of Needcompany because of the promotion logic.
Yeah, the individualization of society, also in the 90s, people needed names. They needed stars or something, you know. The word Needcompany was not enough, or the word roses was not enough, so it was Anne Teresa, the Keesmaker became more important, because people, apparently, it sells better, you know. That was not an artistic choice. It was a total commercial choice.
And it really worked for you. I mean, in numbers, it worked that you put this name and immediately.
It's hard to say, because we did it. So if we didn't do it, maybe I was also here. I have no idea.
I think it
but
works.
I think it works somehow. The individualization in art is quite recent.
Well,
the first time people signed a painting it's not so old.
No, but
Yeah, but there are so many companies on the market that we don't know who is the head of the company. Like, I don't know, IKEA or something, like very big brand, and we don't know who is behind it, right? There are lots of people behind it. So it's not like that. It should be always like that.
Yeah, but now you talk about something else, IKEA or Mitsubishi or something. That is a person now. IKEA became a person. You know what I mean? This institution is an individual thing.
Yeah, so Needcompany could be the person.
That was my dream, that Needcompany would
without
become,
you as a face.
But it is very difficult, like C'est de la Baie is a good example. Alain Platel, the choreographer of France, fantastic person, he made C'est de la Baie, and also he tried to have more artists around him, and at a certain moment, 5, 6, 7 years ago, he said, I want to take Disappear out of C'est de la Baie. I give it away. Immediately, they said, okay, if Alain goes out of C'est de la Baie, we take away 50% of the money. Immediately. They were almost kaput. So Alain said, no, I stay. You know? Because if I go out of Needcompany now, it's destroyed. So what we are doing now is investing in young people, like also with Lisaboa. We talk like, I want to disappear out of Needcompany. In this and 5 years' time, I don't want to be the artistic director anymore. I'm not leaving Needcompany, but I don't want to be the one who pulls it. I want to be a free artist again. And to prepare the Minister of Culture to do so, it takes 5 years. To say, oh, of course, oh, he's not there anymore. Oh, I have to vanish discreetly. Not with a big bang, because then it is destroyed. So to make an institution out of Needcompany is much more difficult than to make my name bigger, you know? But that's what I want to do. But that's also a choice.
And it has to do also, it's really an economic thing, and in the broader field it has to do with the shift from companies also to projects and productions. So production, it's really a momental gathering of different artists and different producers and co-producers. And the artists, if they want to really also get co-production budgets or subsidies, really their personal prestige, it's the leverage to mobilize these resources. And that's really a shift. That it used to be with the companies, this symbolic capital, this prestige. But now, last 20 years, it has really shifted to individual persons, and then that's why you see in the announcements of the brochures, not only one name of one company anymore, but really a long list of individual artists. It's really because they need the investment in symbolic capital for your individual practice. It has to do with indeed the economic development of the field.
But maybe that's a good lesson if you talk and think about collectives in Poland. Then if you give it a name, it needs to be there needs to be something underneath there with private names as well to make that company name work. That is for sure. That's really my belief. Yeah.
Was it that with Teatr 21? I don't think so.
With sorry.
Because you referred to our Polish context.
Yeah,
No, I'm just saying that because you are thinking about discussing this idea of collectives to gain power or to gain freedom in Poland, then I think then it's important that you also use private names of whoever is in that collective. I think that's an interesting lesson.
Okay. You can say that you believe in democratic system of organization and financing collectives, like the political system, but you really don't believe in this romantic dream that collectivity means democracy, and that because individual is very strong in it, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think so. And with all respect for everybody who is in it, everybody, also in Needcompany, everybody has a huge responsibility. Everybody is his own boss. has his own department, and we work. We always cover each other. We always we talk every week, everybody together around the table. What did you do? What did you do? It's a very severe system, and it's a very stressful system also. There are, not in Needcompany, luckily, but I read there are a lot of burnouts in the theater world in Belgium because everybody is very passionate. They work 70 hours a week, and after 10 years they are kaput. And so that is because they are so passionate that sometimes it explodes. So
yeah, for me as well, it's not about a fake idea of everybody being equal, but what's important is that personalities are different, skills are different, but people bring different things to the table, and you need each other in order to advance. You talked about schaamte. Yes, Hugo de Greef, he put something really on the table which the artist didn't have, but the artist had something which Hugo didn't have. And it's really the combination, and people are assuming different responsibilities and different roles. But the basic thing is also that we need each other, right? And that is, I think, the basic thing about these different ideas of collectivity. It's really sharing resources which are complementary and then making added value out of that.
But we discuss every day the construction of Needcompany. It's very technical, but that's what you want to be. So we discuss every day how to manage Needcompany. There was a big shift a few years ago, and Elke, the chief dramaturg of Needcompany, I asked her, "Do you want to be the boss of Needcompany?" And she said, "Are you crazy? Then I lose my freedom." She didn't want to. Then I met Johan. And Johan is a manager, and he said, "Jan, it's totally wrong that you need a manager full time. If the manager is there every day, freedom is gone. I will be your manager for 2 days a week." I said, "Are you crazy? This is not possible. The one before you had a burnout because he couldn't manage it. I do it in 2 days. And these 2 days, he comes to the office, and all the others say, Johan is there, okay, now, let's say, but then he's gone 3 days, and then he's there again one day. It's fantastic. Because then everybody can focus on his work, and there is no boss. And I'm in my atelier, so we discussed that. The discovery of Johan for me was really incredible, that he said, I want to change the system of management in the cultural sector. That was his ambition, and Jan allowed me to use Needcompany as a playground to try. 2 days a week. And so far so good.
Interesting administration decision. You wanted to ask the question.
Well, I was, because I have in my head this real situation, when artistic value of the collective work is huge. And then there is a leader who is administrative leader, let's say. But his name, personal name, is of course known better than any other names from this group. And then he gets invited as a director, for example, outside. But he is not a good director. Okay. And the artistic value of the collective work is much better than his individual work. Yeah. And then he goes outside, does work, which is not artistically as good as the collective work of this company. And then what happens? I mean, his individual work, then everybody invests in the individual name, gets lessens the artistic work of the group, because it shows back. Yes. Yeah. The group. So I'm also thinking about this. If that is happening, then the group goes kaput. Yes. Absolutely. It actually happens.
It is an individual choice. If I say to Johan as my manager, I said, "You're my boss, okay? I go to Salzburg. We try to have as much money as possible from these rich guys over there. And then it's my choice, together with Johan, to say we put it on your bank account, my personal bank account, or on the bank account of Needcompany. That's a choice. That's a choice. And I know a lot of artists who make a living by doing opera, disappear in opera, and then come back as an intendant. And there are Johan Simons, for example, the famous Dutch director. He has 17 jobs to make money. I don't understand why people accept that, you know. So that's not our cup of tea, but that's a choice. It's a choice.
And can I add just a tiny little bit to that? I think in the arts sector it's quite okay that a collective starts, becomes famous, and all of a sudden stops because it went wrong. Because it means that you create a void in which other people, other artists and new collectives can start. So it doesn't bother me so much that all of a sudden it's kaput. Shit happens and then you die. Really. And you make a new collective. Start again. You learn from failure much more than you learn from success. It's really important to fail.
I think we are in a shifting moment of really
You're becoming strong, that's why
holding back to the long-term work, you know,
Yeah.
with Odin Teatret in our heads, or with Grotowski and his work for 20 or 30 years or something, and our other collectives who work for 30 years together. We have this in mind very much, and this is a very strong ethos that works still. And some parts of our artistic community still holds to this ethos of long-term work in the one group and so on. So this is, I think we're in a shifting moment.
The other very important thing to add to that is leadership. Is being able to give that freedom, and knowing when to give that freedom, and taking it back, checking up on it. But leadership for me goes to all levels in your company or in your collective. It means that the cleaning person is taking leadership on that cleaning, and that the leader of the collective is trusting with leadership the person doing that job, and actually giving a lot of energy to that person and giving a lot of enthusiasm, so that the person can operate, and that's all about leadership.
Last question. So now you are, after more than 30 years of existing Needcompany, now you entered into new stage because of the mill, because of the new venue, which is flourishing, also in terms of the neighborhood. So just a little comment, the mill is a venue of Needcompany since last year, since March. It was the opening in Molenbeek, in a district of Brussels, which is very multi-cultural and not easy, like to you can say more, of course. Anyway, my question is, now you have this venue, you invite people, you do more things open for the audience. Where is the limit of collective as a structure? Like, where is the limit in order not to turn into, let's say, little institution, like in terms of losing control in a way on human coherency or on qualities that are a soil for the company, like trust, like what you said about giving responsibilities and so on, because we could find some examples in history where these great artistic structures became institutionalized or lost something, you know. So how you, to what degree you think about this also now?
Yeah, but that's exactly the mill, to not become an institution, an anonymous institution. We left the center of Brussels, we went to Molenbeek at the moment that the Syrian warriors, the IS, the Islamistic terrorism, they came all from Molenbeek. So it was a danger zone. Trump called Molenbeek the hellhole. So a lot of artists moved to Molenbeek for two reasons. Artists are not afraid of multiculturality. Secondly, ground prices were much cheaper. Nobody wanted to live there. So we could afford to go there. It's half as cheap as in the center of Brussels. So artists go there, and I think it's important that we talk about the responsibility of artists in society. I think we have to take the center again of society. I think authors, philosophers have not enough power. I think every minister has to have at least 5 philosophers and people who read books, to inform. Trump never read a book. Can you imagine? Trump never read a book, and he's the most powerful man in the world. How afraid can you be? So if you go to Molenbeek, it is not to change Molenbeek, but to change yourself. So I worked 27 years in the center of Brussels. I go abroad, and after 1 year and a half, I feel Needcompany changed. I didn't do that. It just happens. And that is also by choice that you move out, by choice that you open your door. And what happens then is that we talk together. Okay, we do a weekend opening of our house, and we cook with refugees or whatever. And then we say, okay, you're the chief dramaturg, but today you have to open and close the door, and you do the dishes, Johan. You know what I mean? So it also helps to know each other better. So on every level, it's good to open your doors and sometimes to close them again. But this is new for me, and it helps a lot to think differently about art and to think differently about society. Yeah? So it's all about the choices, what you do.
Thank you very much for the discussion. We must finish. I must say, I would like to work in the system like your system, much more than in the system that we work in Poland, because there is the possibility to open the door.
But I must say
we
something.
Must be really Machiavelli to open the door, because the collective work is present in the repertory theaters. But the directors have a lot of difficulties with that.
But I think you should realize that the quality of the actors in Poland are extremely high. You have a very strong quality, and you have to make a brand out of it. Like we had the Flemish wave for 30 years, Poland has to be the new wave. You can do that. You have such a powerful history, and you have such a phenomenal artist also. And that's why, Likovsky, he disappears into opera. That's maybe a mistake. You know what I mean? But that's a choice. You cannot change him. So it all happens when you pull the wagon, I think. And then it's very beautiful. Don't forget to see the show tonight at 6. It's a very good show. At 8, Martin. At 9, Martin.
9, yeah.
See that show. Really.
Thank you.